All right, it's training camp, and we're getting to the end of camp, and of course, there's one topic that has started to dominate the discourse around the hockey world, and it's not injuries, although preseason injuries are quite a topic du jour these days. The other topic du jour, and one that always seems to come up at this time of year, is waivers. So let's talk about waivers, what they are, what they're for, why they exist, and kind of how they work. First of all, what are waivers? Waivers is basically the process by which teams have to offer up eligible players to the other 31 teams before they can assign it to the American Hockey League. Essentially, everyone's ordered pizza before or had food in a group. Everyone sort of chips in their money and agrees upon, we're all going to get an equal share. But inevitably, you're going to have a little bit left over. And so the process, with your friends, you have an extra chicken wing, you have an extra slice of pizza, whatever. You go, before you reach for it, you go, does anyone else want this? That's basically how the waiver wire works. Before you can stash your best and brightest young players who aren't quite ready for the NHL but are waiver eligible, you put on the waiver wire and say, does anyone else want this before I send them to the Wranglers? And that's in a nutshell how it works. The thing with the waiver wire is those players aren't free. I know we always joke, oh, you're going to lose player X for nothing. You don't actually lose them for nothing. That's sort of a misconception. You actually lose them for a nominal fee. The fee is scaled. It's called the waiver price in the CBA. It's scaled based on the amount of time the player has spent under an NHL contract. If they have barely become waiver eligible, it's a high waiver fee, and it cycles its way down to the point where after they've spent over 9 years, 9 or more years in the NHL contracted system, it's sort of a flat waiver fee. So again, the idea is that you want I think they structure it this way so that there's sort of an incentive to claim players who are a bit more experienced because the waiver fee is lower, and sort of a disincentive for teams to claim players that are a little bit less experienced. As a corollary to that, essentially, if you're a team with some good young players in your system and you're worried about losing them, having a higher waiver fee when you put them on waivers makes it a little bit less likely they'll get claimed, all things being equal. Granted, some teams are budget teams, some teams aren't. If you're a team that's very good at producing players that keep getting claimed off waivers, you at least get some money for it. But you typically teams are hesitant to put players that they are worried about getting claimed on waivers, because while you get 60 grand, 90 grand, whatever, it's not nothing, but you'd rather have the player. And so the value to the organization isn't the money, it's the player. And so they essentially try to set up a series of disincentives and ways around things. So why does the waiver wire exist? Why does the waiver process exist? Essentially, we alluded to it just before. The NHL wants to make the most talented players play in the league. And so they want to make it tough for teams to hoard talent. If we assume that, in an ideal world, the talent would be evenly distributed between the 32 NHL clubs. That's not the case. We don't live in an ideal world. We live in a world where there are some teams that are just better at drafting, development, acquisition, what have you. And so the waiver wire exists to prevent those teams from hoarding players. And so it allows, in theory, the teams that are worse off to get a bit of a boost by claiming players through waivers. So I'll use Ilya Solovyov as an example. He was placed on waivers by the Flames on Tuesday. He cleared on Wednesday and was assigned to the AHL. So the way it worked with Solovyov is, the Flames put his name on a list saying, hey, we're putting Ilya Solovyov on waivers. That list is distributed throughout all the teams at noon Mountain Time on Tuesday. So everyone in the league found out Ilya Solovyov's on waivers. Here's his name, position, and the waiver fee. And so all the teams had a chance to mull it over. The waiver priority is essentially the inverse order of the prior season standings until November, and then it's the inverse order of the current season standings. So right now, the San Jose Sharks get first crack at the waivers, and it goes down from there. And so the President's Trophy winning team for the previous year has last crack at players, and then the team that is currently first in points percentage after November gets the last crack. If you go through all the teams and no one wants to put in a claim, great. They clear waivers. They can be assigned outright to the American Hockey League. Once a player clears waivers, they can be brought back and forth from the AHL for 30 cumulative days or 10 games played on an NHL team. So in Solovyov's case, once the season starts, the Flames can bring him up, and he can spend up to a month in any combination. He can spend 10 days at a time, 1 day at a time, whatever, up to a month on the roster, or play up to 10 games, whichever happens first, without having to go through waivers. On day 30, he has to go through waivers again. Game 10, he has to go through waivers again. So that's that in a nutshell. Similarly, if someone had claimed Solovyov, it goes to whichever team has the highest waiver priority, going from bottom of the standings and working your way down. So if Seattle, for example, said, I want Ilya Solovyov, the league would say, okay, you had a successful claim, pay the fee. The fee goes to the team that lost the player. The contract of the player goes to the team that claimed them, and Bob's your uncle. But, if they want to send him down later on, they have to go through the whole process again. And so the team that loses the player has a chance to claim them back. There's a lot of specific rules and stuff. It gets kind of circuitous, but in a nutshell, that's kind of how it works and how it's supposed to work. So some players have to go through waivers and some players do not. And generally speaking, here's how it works. There's a table that the NHL put together. It's in the CBA. The table is very helpful. I'll display it right now. So the age part of this table is both kind of complicated and confusing and kind of simple. So I'll try to do the simple explanation. It's essentially just the age you are the year you signed your entry level deal. So if you sign before your birthday, it's just the age you are on the birthday of the year you sign. So if I sign before my birthday, I'm still older. It's whatever the oldest age you are in the year you sign. So if you are a 2000 born player and you sign in 2020, but you signed before you turned 20, it's still considered you signing at 20. So that's the simple explanation. There's some complexities about, if you sign in your draft year, whether or not you have a late birthday and early birthday, but that's just sort of some nonsense in the way they explain it in the CBA. It's essentially just the oldest age you are in the year that your contract is signed for the first time. So based on that, you get a certain number of years, and that is basically the playing seasons. I'll show you an example in a second of exemption. And so once you exceed either the years from signing or your games played, you're done. You become waiver eligible. So this happens. You'll know sometimes this happens in season. So if they say 160 NHL games played for skaters, that means that if you're a skater and you play a couple full NHL seasons, you're a pair of 82 game seasons, and then in your third season, midway through that season, if you hit 160 games played, which is playoffs and regular season combined, after 160, you become waiver eligible. Granted, the way it tends to work in operation is that skaters are generally, all things being equal, they have a waiver exemption for the duration of their entry-level deal. It changes sometimes. Sometimes there's some variations in signing year, but that's kind of how it works. And so typically you wouldn't run out of exemption until you're either past your entry-level deal, or if it happens during your entry-level deal, it runs out because you've become an NHL regular during your entry-level deal. Matthew Tkachuk used up his waiver exemption halfway through his entry-level deal because he was an NHL player at that point. And it's not like you're going to play waiver games with an NHL regular player. But that's sort of how it works. Goalies tend to get their ELC plus one extra year. But there's some nuances to it. I'll use a good example of this from recent Flames years is Rasmus Andersson. Rasmus Andersson was an October 1996 birthday, and he was drafted in 2015, and he signed in September 2015, a couple months after he was drafted. For waiver purposes, because he was a late birthday, he was signed as a 19-year-old. That was the oldest he was during his draft year, and so as a 19-year-old, he got 4 waiver exemption years, or 160 NHL games, whichever happened first. He used his waiver exemption years were 2015-16 through 2018-19. And by that point, for 2019-20, it did not matter how many games he played. He'd already exceeded the years of exemption. Connor Zary right now requires waivers for the Calgary Flames for this reason. It's this kind of a structure where he's a late birthday, he signed right after his draft year, and so even though he's still in his entry-level deal because of a slide in his entry-level deal similar to Anderson, he needs waivers to go anywhere. Granted, you're not going to try to play fun in waiver games or minor league shenanigans with someone like Connor Zary, who's a regular, but, crazier things have happened. But that's sort of how it works. Broadly speaking, those are the mechanisms. I'll do a separate video on the slide rule because it's complicated and there's a lot of nuances to it and a lot of technicalities. But generally speaking, yeah, that's kind of how it works. And then essentially, once you are, if you're a waiver exempt player, you can go back and forth. If you are waiver eligible, you need to be placed on the waiver wire to gain that 30-day window to go up or down. And once your waiver clock has sort of reset. Once you've done, your 30 days, you go through it again, your clock resets, and then you have another 30 days or 10 games on the roster. And again, it's cumulative, so you can, be yo-yoed back and forth. And, as sort of how it goes, some players tend to, especially players that the teams want to maintain some flexibility on, they might only play 2.5 weeks, maybe 3 tops in the NHL, so that they can get sent down and they maintain their exemption for later on because they might need them later. So for the curious, here is a list of Calgary Flames players who are waiver exempt for the 2024-25 season. To the best of my knowledge, all of these players will be waiver exempt for the entire year. It is not possible, to our recollection, for these players to play enough games this season to tick it over to becoming waiver eligible. So the players are Andrew Basha, Parker Bell, Hunter Bustevich, Lucas Siona, Matt Coronado, Matvei Gridin, Artem Grushnikov, Sam Honzik, Valtteri Ignatev, Yoni Yermo, Rory Cairns, Adam Klapka, Yan Kuznetsov, Etienne Morin, Sam Morton, Ilya Nikolaev, Zane Parekh, Jeremy Poirier, William Stromgren, and Dustin Wolf. The players with stars next to their names, Basha, Gridin, Morin, and Parekh, are all in junior hockey right now, so they're not eligible to be playing in the AHL. They will be eligible once their junior seasons are over. So at that point, waivers might become an issue, but they're also way too young. That no matter what, this would count as a waiver year of exemption, even if they're playing in junior. It counts as a waiver year of exemption because it's a year after they signed. But everyone else, the notables here that could become important later, Matt Coronado played the NHL half the year last year, looked pretty decent, was pretty good. Sam Honzik could be playing in the National Hockey League this year based on how good his camp has been. He's waiver exempt. He's played 0 of his 160 games. Adam Klapka has played a handful of his games, but he still has tons of exemption left. Same thing with Dustin Wolf. Dustin Wolf is a goaltender, so he's sort of used up 18 games. Typically, goaltenders get 80 games of exemption. And the extra year, Wolf has played 18, so unless he plays in every single game to run through the season, he will still be waiver exempt until the end of the season. But this is his last year of exemption. So Wolf becomes waiver eligible next year. So does Klapka. So does Coronado. So there's a lot of interesting players who will become waiver eligible in 25-26. But as the saying goes, there's still a lot of baseball left to be played until then. So in a nutshell, that's kind of how waivers work. They're just a mechanism meant to protect players and protect teams in different ways, spreading talent around so that teams can get better, and making sure that trying to keep NHL players or guys that the system considers should be NHL players based on their level of experience. try to keep them in the NHL. So it's sort of trying to prevent talent from being stashed to the benefit of teams and the benefit of players. We'll see how it works, but that's sort of the idealistic version of why it exists, why they think it could work. So yeah, that's waivers in a nutshell. I'll do a few videos in the future, sort of about these kind of mechanisms. I'll look at sort of things like no trade clauses, no move clauses, and I'll get into the NHL's the entry level slide rule, because as mentioned, it's weird, but it can be a really important, interesting thing that teams and players can use to gain some flexibility. So that's all for now. If you like this video, please click like. If you really like this video, please click subscribe and share and comment. And if there's any other topics you want me to do videos on, or any questions you have, please feel free to dive into the comments. For now, that's all I got. So I'll talk to you guys next time, and thanks for watching.